But isolation's a great story because I always say that when I isolated and when I drank, I isolated, right? And I drank alone, just like George Thorogood says in his song. And not only I drank alone, I drank I've talked about it many times. I drank alone in my basement because that's where I could drink heavy, right? I could drink heavy and fast. Like I go down there, like I pound a few drinks. I wouldn't stay down there for hours usually, but usually I'd have a reason to go down there and it's like pound a couple drinks, pound a couple shots of tequila, pound a couple glasses of wine, whatever I was drinking at the time, and then head back upstairs and let the alcohol kick in.
I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast.
Last few weeks, we've been talking about Joe and Charlie, and the reason for going to Joe and Charlie is to stop isolating and to get around people. And we had a new participant week 2, our buddy Rick, and he came out because, you guessed it, he was isolating. So we got like a table full of people isolating, and you said you had a story about Rick. But that's what I want to talk about, isolation, because I love to isolate.
Yeah, well, good to be with you, Matt. And Rick, we started this hiking group, right? John and I, we've talked about it on this podcast before. If you listen, John
yes, I'm on that thread where I get pop-ups every 5 seconds.
Yeah, well, hopefully it won't be that bad. But we started this thing where people have started inquiring. Hey, I like to go hiking with you. And so I reached out to a few people who I knew hike, and it's blown up to 14 people, right? There's 14 of us now. But anyway, Rick was one of the early adopters of that, and he agreed to come hiking with us last weekend. And so I hadn't seen Rick. Rick used to be a big Monday nighter, right? Mm-hmm. That's where I met him. That's where I knew him from. And he was there all the time before COVID. And then he's been back a couple times in the last several months, but literally a couple times. So I said to him, "Hi, how you doing?" And I always inquire. I'm like, "Hey, are you doing meet?" A lot of these guys have started to do meetings elsewhere. Like a lot of the guys from Monday night, I know they're doing other meetings. They just found other meetings, and that's fine. And again, I don't judge people; they do whatever they want. So I asked him, like, "Hey, I've been doing meetings." He goes, "No." He goes, "I need to really pick that up." And he said, I've been working from home, and it sounded a lot like you, right? I mean, it's the same reason why you did Joe and Charlie. He's like, I'm working from home, and he goes, sometimes I have to force myself out just to get a cup of coffee so I could see people, you know? And so John invited him up to the house, and he showed up. And so it's nice to see that, somebody would do that. Number one, be invited, and then number two, this is the whole thing about this program. You can be invited, you can be told what to do, you can be shown what to do, but you have to get up and do it. So Rick had to get up on a Wednesday night and drive his car and get to this place and then, put his 2.5 or 3 hours in, depending on how long the drive is. And it just was good to see him because...
Oh, I thought you were going to say depending on how long John's going to talk.
Yeah, that's the other thing. But... No, it's a long night for me, right? I mean, it's a long night for you too, because we both live about 30 minutes away from there. So, I look at that, that's a 3.5 hour investment for me for one sort of AA meeting type of deal. Mm-hmm. I was just going through, as a side note, I was going through that today. Like, how many hours am I spending on? Because it's an issue sometimes at home. How many hours am I spending on AA? And it's like, on a regular basis, without a Joe and Charlie, I'm spending about 10 hours, right? About 10 hours a week with everything I do. And that may sound like a lot, but, when you start throwing all the other activities in, a lot of those hours are at night. So that's something that I've been trying to manage. Lately, it's been really, really busy. Tonight I had a GSR meeting, right? And I've been out so much, and I just decided I wasn't going because I haven't been home at all. And I just said, okay. I told my wife I was going to stay home and skip the GSR meeting tonight. So, but isolation's a great story because I always say that when I isolated and when I drank, I isolated, right? And I drank alone, just like George Thorogood says in his song. And not only did I drink alone, I drank I've talked about it many times. I drank alone in my basement. Because that's where I could drink heavy, right? I could drink heavy and fast. Like I'd go down there and like I pound a few drinks. I wouldn't stay down there for hours usually, but usually I'd have a reason to go down there and it's like pound a couple of drinks, pound a couple of shots of tequila, pound a couple of glasses of wine, whatever I was drinking at the time, and then head back upstairs and let the alcohol kick in.
George Thorogood has always said that he's only done 3 songs about booze. That's it, about alcoholic drinking. Just 3. Shouldn't get a bad rap.
Right.
I used to drink alone. That was my jam.
Yeah.
It always offended me to hear people say that. When you drink alone, it's a sign of a problem. If I was going to not drink alone, I wasn't going to drink.
Yeah, me too. Certainly for the most time, not obviously not all the time, but for a lot of the times I drank, especially, on those Tuesday nights or Monday nights or Wednesday nights, people weren't out drinking, so I certainly on a weekend or certainly you have some type of event you go to, you at least start doing it. But I talk about it all the time. I had 2 drinking. I was the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's like I would go out in public and show you that I could drink like a normal human being. That's what I would do. Mm-hmm. And then I would come home and I would finish the job. And if I didn't finish the job, I was anxious and I didn't sleep well and all those type of things. It was a nightmare. It was a nightmare.
I've been thinking a lot about isolating and getting around people and having a social life because feels like for me a struggle. It feels good to be home alone, or I should say it feels comfortable. And if I'm around strangers, I really feel at a loss of what to say to them. I have some pretty deep social anxiety. I just sometimes feel at a loss for words when I'm talking to people. Mm-hmm. If life could be where people are around microphones and we're doing a podcast, I would be in total control.
Right.
But actually having to talk to people in real life is very challenging for me. And that social anxiety got me to drink because it brought my barrier down. And now I don't have that as an option. So I really feel like I've got to force myself that even when I'm in public to talk to new people. It's a real thing for me that I think it is around fear of rejection, fear of being laughed at and pointed at. And I don't want to talk to you. And why would you come talk to me? All of that stuff is going on.
It's a lot of it is, and again, we talk about the same stuff because that's the stuff that made us drink, but it's a lot of that is all that feeling that I had, and I know you had, of feeling less than, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's feeling less than. Feeling
yes,
like,
that's exactly it.
Right? You're put in a situation, and my whole life I felt like that because I was always reaching. Like from an early age, I realized because I grew up very poor and I grew up in public housing and all that kind of stuff in the city. And I always would see the people who, I always said, if you owned your own house, if you lived in a one-family house, I thought your family was rich. That's what I really, that's the wealthy people. So that was my strive too. And then a couple of my friends started in the projects with us, but they moved out into single-family homes. We didn't for a long time, for many years after that. We finally did. So I knew what I wanted. So I was always trying to start. I talk about it like the women I dated were sort of a notch up. I mean, I always went for that notch up. A little bit higher class, a little bit higher social economic class. But that also put me in that situation where I always felt uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Right? So you'd put me with their family, at their family gatherings, at anything like that. It was uncomfortable. Especially when I got married. When I got married, like my first wife, her dad was a doctor. They lived in they did have money. They lived in a nice house. Now, they weren't, super wealthy, but they were well-to-do, lived in a beautiful house. And I can just remember, I can remember being there, like they had a little engagement party for us, and it was all his doctor friends. It was one of the most uncomfortable things I've ever done. I was totally, feeling like I didn't belong there. So it's that fight. It's that fight to overcome that and get out of your own skin and try to socialize.
That would make me crazy when I was a kid, because I lived in a pretty wealthy town, and I lived in subsidized housing in a wealthy town.
Right.
So I always felt less than.
Yeah.
Just by comparison, you go out of this apartment complex, and it was, I guess, working class, but it still was pretty nice.
Right.
But people were really wealthy, and I wasn't. People had good nuclear families, and I had a mom and a dad I hadn't seen since 1982, and no brothers and sisters. Everything about me was odd in the wrong way, and it really created a feeling of less than. I'm not like these other people. I'm different. And it just led me to a point where I just didn't know how to communicate with other people. It's still, I have to put work in.
Yeah, I don't know when I overcame it or how, but I did. Part of that, I think, for me was growing up with such a large family, right? 5 siblings, 6 siblings total, including me. And then, I've always said it, my 32 first cousins on my father's side, so who were very close. So I think that allowed me to break out some of the social stuff. So I was always pretty good with that. Certainly by the time I got to probably freshman in high school, I was still a bit, and again, this is what we talk about, right? Well, what happened as a freshman in high school? I found booze and pot, right? That's what I did. And then all of a sudden, by a sophomore in high school, I was relaxed. I was able to talk to friends. I was able to talk to the jocks who were in my class, right? I was able to talk to I was at a trade school, carpentry. I was able to talk to the guys who were way better carpenters than I was or would ever be. I found my dope smoking friends, and but I still had the other friends, and that's where it started for me, and that was the difference, right? That for me, that was the difference. I found booze, I found pot, and I also, all of a sudden, I became a bit social.
Booze definitely made a difference for me. That really came into the picture in college, where I thought it brought down my inhibitions, but I just acted more childish. I just had a lot less inhibitions to do it. It was a real reason why I thought I could never get sober, because if I got sober, how would I have the ability to talk to people? This was already a problem, and without booze, I was useless.
Yeah.
So what was I going to do?
Yeah. Absolutely. Listen, I get it. I mean, that was me. That's why I drank all the time. I mean it. That's one of the reasons why I drank. And certainly when it came to dating and the other, women, I had to be drinking, right? I mean, I just was too nervous around them. My wife and I were talking about that, tonight a little bit, how uncomfortable it was early on when we were young. When we were talking about high school days, I didn't know my wife back then. But we were talking about how uncomfortable it was, and how for some of us, not for all of us, but for some of us, it was a very difficult time of trying to negotiate that. And again, as soon as I found booze, mostly booze, but for me back then, pot was a big one too. When I found that, man, it just changed everything for me. It really did. But then, it came for full circle. And it's interesting because we talk about, at the end of my drinking, what was I doing? I was drinking alone, right? I mean,
Yep.
I sort of ended up at the same place where I started. I started, being isolating and being nervous and all that, and I ended isolating, not being so much nervous, but being ashamed and all those type of things, trying to, again, probably drink different feelings away, but still drink feelings away.
Yeah, it's disconcerting to drink alone and you got a big bag of empties, which I did.
Yeah.
But it was a case of, that social anxiety. If it wasn't going to be alone, it wasn't going to be at all.
Right.
That was not something I was going to do.
Yeah.
This topic has been beating me across the head. I was listening to the Prof G podcast, and he had Mel Robbins on.
Uh-huh.
And Mel Robbins was talking a lot about getting out there and interacting with people. It was more along the lines of how online dating sucks. Yeah. And she was talking about if you want to start dating people, expand your social circle. And a lot of it was around practice of talk to people online.
Mm-hmm.
I thought about I don't want to talk to people online. How do I even start the conversation? I see people at the gym talking to each other. I'm like, how do I even get into a conversation with somebody at the gym who's working out? That's a place where I feel inferior. See all the people who can do harder cardio than me, lift more weights than me. I'm like, I'm going to have a conversation with them. Good luck.
Yeah. I hear a lot of people talk. It's interesting you say that. People have said that before. If you want to practice talking to someone and getting out of that, and they're talking like maybe talking to a sponsor or talking to someone in AA if you need help, they said just start talking to somebody in the grocery line, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do that naturally now. Now, again, what happened to me was I spent 30 years in sales. And most of it, so a lot of it, my early sales were face-to-face, in-home. I was selling some type of product in-home, that old cutthroat sales. And then as my career went on later, it was mostly telephone stuff. But I still had to talk to people. I had to talk to people on the phone, certainly had meetings and would go see people. So in the end, I became very comfortable doing that, and I talk to people all the time now. Like we were in New Jersey, and we went to an LL Bean because we had to exchange something my wife had bought, and we was there with the grandkids and all. And I tried on a couple pairs of pants because their stuff is nice, and I tried them on. And I'm like, oh, these pants are nice. They were a little expensive. I didn't want to buy them. Like I really didn't need them. And then I'm walking by, and our husband and wife are looking at them, and I just stopped and said, those are nice pants. I just tried them on. Like, those are very comfortable, And I always wonder, like, what people think. Like, who's this strange guy talking to us out of nowhere, Today I can do that. So I'm pretty comfortable doing it today. I don't typically isolate. And the other thing I think of, like I said, I'm busy with AA stuff, mostly with recovery stuff, right? I'm always finding stuff to be busy with. So for me, it doesn't allow me to be isolating, right? I've always liked to have, I've always had for the last 10 plus years, probably 12 plus years now, a Monday and a Friday meeting. Always. Monday and Friday were my two meetings that I always went to. And then I always put a third meeting in there somewhere. I always had a third meeting. And that third meeting now is a noon meeting on Wednesday. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I go to meetings, right? So I'm never that far from a group of people. And then I throw in some other stuff. Tuesday night, I did a speaking commitment at a detox with a couple new guys. And then typically tonight, I'd be at a GSR meeting. Sometimes I'll, do other things. So that's one of the things that I do to make sure I don't isolate and I don't step away from the program too much is take those type of commitments and keep doing them, even if I don't want to do them.
That was another thing Mel Robbins was talking about. So I had to turn the podcast off at a certain point because it was like, okay, I get the point. I get where you're going with this, and you could have stopped the conversation here. My patience, this is my fatigue. My patience level for certain things is not where it could be. But she talked about doing the things that you don't want to do. If you want to improve your life, just do the opposite of what you're going to do. If you're talking, she was like, if you're talking about building, doing a podcast, then don't sit there and watch YouTube all day. Go and do a podcast. If you want to get another job, instead of just watching YouTube videos, watch YouTube videos about building a better resume. It's a reminder for me because with my ADHD, I can get stuck in a rut of inactivity because I just can't get out of it. I'm paralyzed. And I had to put in like hours of effort to create a slide today just to get momentum. Once I got through and did the agony of just trying to get this going, I was in a good place. Once I saw some progress, I'm like, okay, now I'm into doing this because I see something happening, but I have to get some progress going, and it is agonizing just to get momentum. Like it takes me forever to get momentum going. When I do, then things are fine.
Yeah. I'm the exact same way with that. I can ignore a project for a long time, and I had a project going on. I'm working on a project right now, and it's been sitting down there for months, maybe close to a year. It's an old commode, an oak commode, small one that we've turned into a bowl that we put the dog's water in. And over the years, it had gotten wet so much it started to really come apart. And it had been down there for a year, and I just knew. I was like, oh, I got to take it all. I got to clean it out, boom. And same thing. As soon as I started working on it, I was able to get some momentum and keep pushing through it. But, man, ignoring that, and that happens to me all the time. I was at a meeting yesterday, and this guy, Dan, who goes there, who I like a lot, I don't know him that well, but he talks about, goes, my problem is discipline.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, I know all these things. He goes, I go to a nutritionist, and it's like, if I do what they tell me to do, I'll be okay, and he goes, but my problem is discipline. And I totally identify with that. Yep. I'm not as disciplined as I like to be. As much as I try to start new habits, listen, I'll tell you a simple habit I've tried to start, and I put it out there so people know what the struggle is for me. I said, you know something? I'm going to start this year. I'm going to do 10 push-ups a day. That's it, 10 push-ups a day. I think I've done it 4 times since the beginning of the year, right? I set the number low so it wouldn't be something like, it wouldn't be an obstacle. But I just haven't been able to figure out how to get that momentum and do it, and every day knock it off. And that's, so that's another thing I got to start doing. I got to figure out how to do some of that stuff. Get back into working out. I know you were. I don't know if you still are, but going to the gym, do some workouts.
I missed this morning because I was gassed, but yeah,
You're still going?
Good. Oh yeah.
Good. And I've had a Planet Fitness subscription, whatever, pass, a monthly thing. Cost me $10 a month, and that's why I signed up for it. Cost me $10 a month, and I've used it once since I signed. Literally, I've used it once since I signed up, and I think about and I was I'll use it. I use it next week. I'll start going there next week. I just can't figure out how to get there. So one of these days, I always tell my wife I need a round to it to get it going.
I had a hard time when I shifted to doing it in the morning, and I didn't want to do it, but I knew that if I didn't go in the morning before work, it wasn't going to happen because I couldn't do it in the afternoon anymore.
Right.
If I couldn't, I have to find a way to just start doing it and build the habit. It's just like, I'm going tomorrow. I'm going to set the alarm and I'm going tomorrow. It is setting small goals and then giving yourself grace that you broke the goal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's, if I get there and I can only do 5 minutes on the treadmill, I got in the habit.
Right.
So you have to, so going to Planet Fitness, just say, I'm going to go tomorrow, even if I don't spend a lot of time there.
Yeah.
It's not about the quality of the workout up front. It's about just getting in the door.
I agree. And it happened with my hiking, right? I've talked a little bit about this in the last couple of podcasts, but last year I didn't hike at all. And I just couldn't get myself motivated. What happened was last year I wasn't hiking, and then I got sucked into John's hiking, which is always harder hiking. And I did a couple big hikes, and I got my ass kicked. And when I do difficult hikes, when I try to reach for a bigger hike and it's harder with more elevation stuff, I cramp. I've tried everything. Like I hydrate, I do I tried it all. Just the way my body works. I cramp. My legs cramp. And I doesn't matter what kind of shape I'm in. If I push the envelope, my legs will cramp. And I did a couple hikes that I've done many times, and both times I just cramped horribly. And I was like, I don't need to do that, right? Like I'm not going out for that. And it just stopped me from hiking, and I didn't hike at all last year. And then finally this year, I just like you said, and I can remember the first day I said, like, I went by myself. I got up and I'm like, do I really want to go? It's kind of cold out there. And I put my pack on, I walked out the door, and as soon as I did that, as soon as I got in the car and I went, I was fine. Just like going to the gym.
Yep.
I don't even need to get to the gym. I just got to get in my car and say I'm going to the gym. And be ready, be dressed for it, or have a bag with whatever I'm going to do. And once I do that, I'm fine. And it's the same thing for meetings. I say that all the time too. For me, I don't. My regular meetings I don't take off because I'm tired and stuff. So it's just about getting in the car, heading to that meeting, and then I'm fine. And I I've done okay with that, and that keeps me from isolating. It keeps me from just being alone in my own head.
I absolutely had to do it this Monday. I needed a break.
Yeah.
I've had 2 weekends of volleyball. So when we have volleyball, you're waking up at 5:30 on Saturday and Sunday. And Saturday was a mess. Saturday was get up at 5:30. We have volleyball. We left there at noon to go to a 1-year-old's birthday party. From there, we went home to pick up somebody else, and then my middle daughter had soccer at 6:30, and we got home by about 8. And my wife said, what do you think about making burrito bowls? I'm like, you want me to make a burrito bowl at 8 p.m. after today? She has no idea she has no idea what is required to cook anything. Yeah. And I'm like, it's something I could do, but there's a lot of stuff I got to do for that. So no, we're not going to do that.
Chipotle will do it for you.
Yeah. Yeah, they'll do it. I don't know what I did. I might have had like cereal or something. I didn't know. And like last night, I was sitting there, like head in my hands. I feel worn out. Yeah. No volleyball this weekend. Thank God.
No volleyball.
3-day weekend. Thank God. And I'm already thinking about the hiking stuff that I've got to find an on-ramp there because there'll always be something else I have to do or something with the family. Although they're saying like, let's go Monday. And I'm like, I don't think Monday's a good idea for me, but we'll see.
Yeah. And that's it. You do got to find an on-ramp. And John and I are talking how we do that, right? Because John and me and maybe even Tim a little bit, who've been doing some hiking with, like, we're ready to do bigger hikes. And I talked to John like offline, like, all right, we're going to be bringing a lot of people in who aren't ready to do 7 miles and 2,000 feet of elevation. So we got to bring these guys in, right? If we're going to invite these guys to hike with us, then we got to plan some smaller hikes to let these guys get involved. Mm-hmm. So, and that's why I said on that whole thing, like, be patient. We'll figure it out. But hopefully it'll be fun. And there's different guys, like Rick and Eric hike all the time together. Mm-hmm. And they do smaller hikes. Like, they don't hike as hard as we hike. So there may be some different groups coming out of that. Like, hey, go with Rick and Eric to start some hiking, get some miles in your feet. But again, and that's one of the things, right? You talk about, well, what's that got to do? Well, what that has to do is you're not isolating. You're out with people, right?
I'm already thinking so the hiking is great for me because it is a reason to be around people.
Right.
I have a purpose. And if we're doing something with a purpose, it's easier for me to chat with people.
And not only that, this happens to be sober hiking. Like, we're all part of sober. We're all part of AA. That's how we know each other. Mm-hmm. And the beauty part of that is, especially when there was just 2 of us or 3 of us, even if it was just me, John, and David, like, we talked a lot of recovery. We talked a lot of meetings. We talked a lot of life stuff, right? Like, John and I were hiking for a couple years together where David wasn't hiking with us a lot. And John and I were just like, we were very much just dumping our shit on each other, mm-hmm. right? Like, what our struggles were, everything. And it's just nice to do, right? It's nice to have that relief valve, and I'm not looking for answers. Sometimes I'm just looking just to have a relief valve and just to dump the shit that I got in my head out, get rid of it.
Sometimes it's just having a good time with other people. That is good sobriety. That helps in my sobriety, that I'm having fun.
Not only that, especially now that you're working out, there's a nice thing. I always say that when I'm doing a hard hike, something that requires lots of work, something that's making me tired, it's not always fun, right? It's like a workout. It's not always fun while you're doing it. The company makes it a little bit more bearable and fun, but man, when I get done with it, I feel so good. I feel like, wow, I accomplished that. I've hiked some pretty good mountains at a pretty late stage in my life, and I just look at it and go, wow, that's pretty cool that I've been able to do that. And John and I talk about it all the time. 95% of the people we meet out hiking are much younger than us, right? And it's just kind of cool to think that here we are, we're still pushing it, and we're still trying to do it, and I love it. I think I'm going tomorrow. Like I talked to Sue, my wife, and I said, what are you doing tomorrow? She's been doing physical therapy. It's like, I worked hard today. And my physical therapist said I'm going to be sore tomorrow. So she said to me, like, if you want to go hiking tomorrow, because I got nothing going on, she's like, if you want to go hiking tomorrow, go hiking. So I may shoot out for there's a place down in East Hampton, about 7-mile hike. Just me and the dog take out for a few hours. Supposed to be a nice day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see what's happening on Monday. I think doing some lighter stuff, because John worries me.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we'll do a nice, easy 6-mile hike. I'm like, I'm not an animal like you.
Yeah, no. He's got to tone it back. But that's okay.
You think?
Yeah, well, he's going to have to. Like I said, we'll have to figure it out. And I think what we talked about doing is alternating each week. Like one week do a smaller hike, and 1 week do a bigger hike. And actually, what I've talked to him, and we're way off topic here, but is planning 2 hikes, a big hike and a small hike, and then depending on who can hike that week, that we choose that hike, right?
Sure.
If the people, who are going to go on that hike are capable of doing the bigger hike, then we go on the bigger hike. If we got some new people, we go on the smaller hike. So lots of options there. And again, it ties into the topic, because what's happening is it gets you out. It gets you out with sober people. It gets you out with a sober activity, and you don't have to isolate. In this day of remote work and all that kind of stuff, it's easy to isolate. So
very easy.
Find your group, find your activity, and go do it. Get out there.
It's hard for me, so if I'm doing it, you can. All right, that's enough for tonight. We'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody.